Hi.
Hello.
So nice to see you guys. So Mike and David are friends and became good friends while they were working at Google.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
And David and I were sort of joking the other day when we were talking, does it take a couple of guys from Google to kind of come in and help sort of crack open the high-end art world and design world? And maybe it does, right? I mean, I think when you and I first started speaking, David, we talked about bringing this sort of technology and data-focused mindset to the industry. And transparency, which is our broad topic, was sort of tied to that, about sort of bringing greater daylight to the industry a little bit.
Yeah, I think the benefit of Mike and I having worked at Google is
It's not me.
Let's see what's happening to David right now. Something's happening to David.
How about I just yell?
He's
Well, I'll pitch in.
yeah.
You
Go
were
ahead.
saying one of the benefits
Jump
of working
in,
at Google.
Mike.
Maybe just back it up. I didn't start Artsy. Artsy has something like $20 billion worth of fine art on the site that you can shop and inquire or buy, and that all came together because the people who first started the company were people who had a deep passion for art, and people who came from the industry and wanted to support that transformation of the industry. One from where you buy art locally to where you can buy art globally and you can buy it digitally. So I'm probably more here to turn the screws than anything else. But in turning the screws, I think what both people like David and I who have the backgrounds that we have can bring is an understanding of how you can use the internet to best connect people to the things that they'll love. Sometimes that's leveraging data, sometimes that's leveraging just great products, and sometimes it's putting your brand to work, all in the interest of ultimately best connecting the supply that you have and the people who'd love that supply.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that the benefit of us having worked at Google and the internet in general is, my own assumption is that, which I think is by this point pretty obvious, is that the internet changes every industry permanently. And when you look at the disruptor in each industry, whether it's obviously Amazon and retail or YouTube and certain parts of media and so on, the disruptive company is able to do so because the people of the company are less anchored in the historical way of doing things. They take a fresh approach. Part of the fresh approach is employing data and technology, but it's not the only thing. Most of it, I think, is just revisiting assumptions that people who have been in the industry for decades take for granted, and coming up with a way that I think extracts the most out of what the internet offers.
Well, exactly. And Mike, you were just referring to your job is to sort of turn the screws a little bit. So tell me what you mean by that, and tell me what some of the challenges are for you kind of bringing the art world on board.
Yeah, we have all this. We have this great supply on Artsy. We have a really well-known brand in the space, and people who love art find art on Artsy all the time. It's what happens in the middle that often creates the most friction. But a lot of people in the room work in e-commerce, and anytime you sort of add a step or add a moment's pause to a purchase, especially when it's when you're buying something that you're passionate about but you don't necessarily need, and art often fits that bill, your conversion rates start to go down. And I'd say probably the most common use case on Artsy today is you find a piece of art that you love. You have to inquire about that piece of art. You can't just click the button to buy it. That's for the majority of our art today. The next day you hear back from the gallery owner, who's a wonderful person who's excited to hear from you, and they share with you the price. Then you start thinking about whether you really want this now that you know the price. Then you reply and you wonder if that's the final price or if there's... The back and forth can take a month. And over the course of a month, I don't know about you all, but I've lost a lot of sales when things take a month to consummate. So for us, what we're currently rolling out to our gallery partners is the option to make the art purchasable. And when the art is purchasable, either you can just click the button and buy it, or you can make an offer. You shorten that conversion funnel dramatically, and you increase the sell-through by something close to an order of magnitude. So for us, it's a big focus right now, just greasing the skids, because the supply is there and the demand is there, and we're not doing as good a job as we should as a software company of helping the two connect and transact.
Well, and where's the friction coming from? So when we have this broad conversation around transparency, in the high-end design world, we're trying to figure out where we want to land with transparency, and just how much we want to reveal around costs and how people are incentivized, and everyone needs to find their own place with it. In the art world particularly, it seems like a lot of people have a vested interest in you not knowing the price of what's hanging in their gallery or what they're showing at their fair in Basel, and so the price is somewhere, as your own Alex Forbes has written about recently. And by the way, if you're not reading Alex Forbes stuff on Artsy, you should be. It's a great place to learn a lot about what's going on. But he talks a lot about bringing greater price transparency to the art world, and how that will just open up the world to a whole new set of buyers that have been holding back.
It does. If you think about it, there's something like roughly 1 million people every year in the US buy a Mercedes, a BMW, or a Lexus, which is a car that is $30,000 or $40,000 more than a completely comparable vehicle. But people will spend that extra $30,000 or $40,000 for a piece of luxury. 98% of those people do not buy art. And so I think it's not a coincidence that art feels inaccessible to so many people. And it really is not easy to buy art for most people, even people of means today. So the more that you can make it feel comfortable and accessible, the more we can achieve the mission, which is just connecting more art with more people and making the world a more beautiful place.
And David, you have a similar mission, right? I mean, you're trying to bring more people on board to want what you have to offer.
Right.
Right?
Right. From our perspective, the kind of key actor in that process is the interior designer. And we've built a big part of the company around helping the designer bridge the gap to a new kind of digitally driven world.
Right. And you're trying to do that as well, Mike. And interior designers play an important role for you. And
Yeah, actually, coincidentally, I was using Artsy. I'd used Artsy for years, but I was using it earlier this year because my wife and I are building a house. And our designer loves Artsy, and we're sort of sharing notes. And then I was buddies with my predecessor at Artsy, and I pinged him and said, I've been using your app. I love it. And then he sort of said, do you want to run the company? Which I felt like it escalated very quickly.
wow.
But like the good news is I got like a couple great works of art and a job. So it's good to see you all.
Really worked out well. Well, so I mean, funny that you say that, because so you literally have just started in the past few months in your role, right? And when you think about what you need to focus on most coming into the position, where's your thinking? What are your priorities a little bit?
A lot of my friends, either who are collectors or who are interior designers, tell me, oh, I love Artsy, and then they say, you know what it needs to do, and then they tell me a feature. Like that's basically what we need to do next. We've got a lot of opportunity to make the product work just even better for more people by banging away at a product roadmap, and that just takes focus and velocity and good product thinking. So that's where our focus is early on.
Okay, but the idea is broader tent, bringing more people, somehow getting more people engaged in wanting to live with art, right?
Yeah, for us, we have something like 1.5 million people every month touch Artsy, but only a fraction of those people are connecting with the galleries and ultimately going all the way down to purchase. So just like anyone in the room who's in e-commerce, I'm looking at a funnel that has a huge top aperture and then goes like this. And usually what improves, what fixes that is product improvement and just the way that you re-engage your customer through product or marketing.
Yeah. And David, I feel like you're much further along now in this journey, right? So you came on board, had to make some major structural changes to the company. You've made them to a large extent, right? You're probably, it's through some of the challenges. And now I feel like you've brought the people on board, right? You're showing them what this new experience means. And tell me how it's feeling for you now.
Yeah, so just to fill in a little bit of the background, and I think most of the audience is probably aware of the basic outline, but First Dibs is almost 20 years old. We, for the first kind of 10, 11 years of our life, were only an advertising business, meaning our vetted dealers, for the most part, would list items, and then all contact between buyer and seller, up to and including the order itself, would happen off of First Dibs. We made the decision about 5 or 6 years ago to switch the model to e-commerce. And we did that for a couple of reasons. The most important one is probably the most obvious one, which is having had experience with many other industries, we could see the progression in terms of buyer behavior, so that increasingly, particularly among younger generations, people want to buy online, full stop. And the inability to do so didn't just produce a worse service, but it left buyers very frustrated and confused. So that was one. And then the second one is what we concluded is once we were at scale, being able to have a large volume of orders gave us the ability to create services that matched up with, as I said earlier, what the interior designer specifically needed to grow her business. So the form that takes for us is a loyalty program we call Trade Rewards, which essentially offers designers a combination of marketing benefits, ways to reduce the risk of their business, and then also ways to increase the efficiency and profitability of their business in exchange for partnering with us to source product through the site.
Yeah.
And it's been quite successful.
Yeah, and bringing it to an e-commerce model changed the relationship with some of your customers and some of your dealers.
Yeah.
But again, I feel like we've sort of gotten through a lot of that. And
yeah, look, I think there was a lot of skepticism early on as to whether or not the premise of our strategy shift was right. Will buyers, in fact, switch their behavior to not just research products online, but actually want to consummate the order? And I think the experience of not just First Dibs over the last few years, but just the industry in general, and also just the kind of the lives of our dealers and brands, not just their own, but their children's and so on. Everything around them, they can see evidence that this premise is actually has some validity. And so I think what we're seeing now, which to me is a pretty fascinating dimension of the story, is the dealer community beginning to shift how they run their businesses to adapt to a digital first world. But the short answer to your question is right. I think there's an acceptance now, sometimes begrudging, that in fact this is increasingly the way the world works.
Well, and Mike, in the art world, we're hoping that more and more dealers are going to want to run their businesses this way, right? And,
That's right.
Right? And I mean, Artsy had the benefit of having some very major players come on early on as investors and supporters of what you were doing. I'm never quite sure if they felt they sort of needed to kind of cover that base and make it, oh yes, absolutely, we want to do that, but really they're going their own way. You can tell me, but I'm sure a lot of your conversations with dealers are about, let's get on board, guys, and show greater transparency and digitize your business more.
That's right. Our company was from when it was founded and first funded has had the support of some of the top galleries and some of the top people in the space, which has been really helpful for us. One of the things that we found over the last handful of years is that the average transaction that's happening on Artsy now, whether it happens through click the button to buy it or you contact the gallery responds, and this sort of longer cycle purchase takes place 2,900 miles away. So I don't know. I think we assumed early on that something like this would happen, but it's a pleasant surprise that generally speaking, when you buy something on Artsy, you're buying it at minimum in another state, from another state, probably from another country, which means we're introducing more artists to collectors who wouldn't have found them. We're introducing to our galleries business that would never have walked in the door, would not even have found them at an art fair. And so the demand that we're bringing is very clearly sort of new and incremental demand. And our interests are aligned with the interests of the collector and the dealer, which is we want to put them together and we want to help them buy it. What's happening a little bit today, and I alluded to this before, I mean, just this weekend, I'm still shopping on our own app, and I found something I loved. I just didn't know the price. And honestly, I'm still new to the art world. Maybe I should have known, but I got the price back, and it was $325,000 above my budget. So
so
it was $327,000.
Yeah.
Was, and then the dealer just emails back, it's like, oh, thank you for your inquiry. It's this much money. What's your shipping address? And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. And so look, that is not time well spent for our dealer. That is not a good experience for our user. Nobody won there. And what the product should do is know the price range in which I'm shopping and help direct me to those folks, and then help make the transaction happen quickly. And nothing that I just described is all that difficult. When we speak to our gallery partners, their answer is, there are some artists who don't want their price shown, and fine, we respect that. It's the artist's choice. Most artists just want to move more art and bring more of their art into the world, and so we're working with our gallery partners to make that happen. It's not complex. We have to mow 100 lawns, and so I talk to the board. They're like, why aren't you mowing the lawns faster? We're like, you don't only mow a lawn so fast. So we're out there, we're talking to our partners, we're bringing the art on, we're making it shoppable, and we're putting it in front of our consumers. And that product for us is growing 30-40% month over month. So we feel like it's on the rails.
So what specifically is growing 30-40%?
Art that is sellable through click a button and buy it, or click a button and make an offer.
Okay, so breaking down the barriers, making it easier to buy, right? In the same way, David, that you found that once people could go on and make an offer, or click, once that was easier.
Yeah, and I think the change that Mike mentioned is something that we encountered as well. Roughly 5 years ago, we switched the format of First Dibs so that it's only in really, really unusual circumstances that our dealers, galleries, and brands are allowed to promote a product without showing the price.
Right.
It's not a very good user experience. And again, it's a good example of how the user comes first. If you build to the user, everybody else succeeds.
Yeah. I mean, and there's a lot of people in this room that are struggling with this issue as well. So designers have a trade price, and a lot of manufacturers and suppliers are wrestling with, is there a way for us to show some kind of a price that a consumer could see to, at least to your point, Mike, get a sense of, is this anywhere in my budget, or is this completely out of reach for me, like the piece of art that you were looking at? Is there a way to educate people a little bit more about what they're looking at? Because what's often frustrating for me is that I find if I could better educate people about what a custom-made sofa really costs and compare it to what they're looking at that they think is comparable, they would make a much better investment in this custom-made sofa, and they would be much happier with their product, and they would get something of much greater value. But because the price is all hidden somewhere, they can't make that informed decision. And I guess that's part of what I think of when I think about transparency, but a lot of people have vested interests to not share that information.
Yeah, I mean, look, a big part of the design industry's economics were based on a lack of transparency, based on preventing the consumer from finding out what the real price is so that the designer can charge a discount. And so much of the energy of the designer went into that. And I can tell you, I came to this business much like Mike as a client of First Dibs. And while I loved the services that my designer provided, I hated the whole process. It made no sense to me. At the same time, I wouldn't have been a customer of this market at all if I hadn't had a very compelling designer who kind of educated me and explained to me the benefits of why I should be a participant in this market. So I think again, sort of go back to this sort of point that we started with. I think it's important for the designer to assume that in a kind of digitally oriented world, their client will always have access to this information that previously they had not had access to. And so building one business and creating a dependency on the maintenance of this artificial distinction between the price to them and the price that should be made available to the consumer, and we kind of hope they're not going to figure it out, but maybe they will, and then we're going to have to explain it, is not a wise move. And instead, what I think is important is for the designer to focus on their core mission, which is providing great design and educating their customer why certain products are worth the premium that are charged for them.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of what we're trying to do, not just via consumer education, but also, as I mentioned before, a lot of these benefits that we offer to interior designers.
Yeah. And Mike, so one of the issues that comes up in the art world, and you talked about some artists not wanting to have their work priced, and there's this notion that somehow the value will fall if the information is out there, or if you know what the last painting by this artist sold for, you'll sort of have a preconceived notion of its value. Is that going to change? Is that going to evolve?
I think there are some artists who object to it just on on the artistic merits of it. There's some if it somehow offends the artist, then we shouldn't do it. It's my opinion.
Right.
The artists who are out there doing sort of who seem to be having the most success in the market right now are the artists who've developed a brand for themselves and are merchandising their brand through products that you can buy at a price. If lots of people in this room at this point have bought a Damien Hirst dot painting for a client, and you know within a couple $1,000s what that thing is going to cost, and that's an artist who's doing really well. If anyone wants a balloon dog, I can get you a balloon dog. You tell me your budget and tell me the size of the space you're trying to fill, and we will get you through Artsy a balloon dog. Now, these are products now that they've been merchandised to some degree, and pricing has been set, and people who've been out front on that are doing really, really well. So I think we'll find that the industry continues to move in this direction. We already have it for secondary works. Those prices you have to pay a subscription fee to one company or another to get the pricing data, but anything that's been sold at an auction, you can generally get the price. People know what things have gone for. And we're seeing it now aggressively work its way into the primary market as well.
Yeah, I'll give you an example of what Mike's talking about. About a year or two ago, Sotheby's ran an auction, and the winning bid on a particular work was close to $100 million. When I looked at the name of the buyer, it seemed vaguely familiar to me, so I looked his name up in our system, and what I saw was that this same person who had just spent $100 million on a painting had bought probably 12 or 13 design pieces from First Dibs, design and art, average price around $10,000. So, you look at these two kind of facts, right? And how long is it going to take for that buyer to demand the same kind of experience from his $100 million purchase as he is receiving from his, $10,000 to $10,000 purchases? I don't think it's going to take that long.
That's right.
And yet the high-end art world is where a lot of that hiding out seems to really be happening, right? Very exclusive. People don't want you to know what they have, right?
Well, the whole sort of ecosystem around the high-end art market is dramatically different from the lower price segment of the market. So at First Dibs, we sort of think of the art market as breaking into two pieces. There's the roughly kind of 100 to 250K and below market, and then there's the 100 to 250K plus market. The higher end market is still dominated by a whole sort of network of galleries and institutions like museums and the auction houses. But again, the whole thing is founded on this basis of a lack of transparency. The market below, which currently is where we're focused, is one which is much more amenable to the same trends that we're seeing in design. And it's also a market where the interior designer has a role to play. So just to put a number on it, roughly a third of First Dibs' total sales is to the designer. The majority of our furniture sales are to designers, not surprisingly. Of that, though, of the total designer spend, roughly 75% is furniture, meaning 25% of what we're seeing interior designers buy on First Dibs is art. but it's art in that second category. It's
Right.
not art in the market that is currently dominated by the auction houses and other players.
Right. The auction houses, that the major ones, will now both be owned by French billionaires, and both
And private, by the way.
right. Both
Yeah.
Christie's and Sotheby's will be privately held companies, and so they're going to be the most difficult ones, right, to bring along on the transparency issue. We think. But who knows? But Mike, you've got your work cut out for you, it sounds like, but I know that you're up to the challenge. So thank you both very much for joining us. Will you
Thank you,
please
thank you.
give
Thanks,
a round
everyone.
of applause for Mike Steib and David Rosenblatt?